Hello everyone, it's Tuesday Tips at 2 here at Be So Creative in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm Ellen and you're going to love this tip today. I'm going to save you so much time and trouble. I'll bet you have to sew buttons on for people. And did you know you have a sewing machine? You have a machine to do that. Some people don't realize that their sewing machine can sew buttons on. And I'm just betting you that in the time it takes you to find a needle and thread a needle and sew a button on, if you'd done that on your machine, you would have had every button on that shirt sewn on in the same amount of time. So I'm going to show you how to do it really on any machine. I think almost any machine can do this. Different machines have different features that make it a little easier. So let's start with the most basic way that I think any sewing machine can do. As long as your sewing machine can sew a zigzag stitch, you can do a button, sew a button on with your machine. So we are going to, first of all, have to lower the feed dogs on the machine. You don't want the fabric to be moving for this project. You want that fabric to stay still because you're going to be basically sewing a bar tack. So figure out how to lower the feed dogs on your machine, and I'm on the Baby Lock Brilliant today, so that's a little button right back here, and it allows the feed dogs to go away so that they're not going to be moving. Now you can do this with a regular presser foot for your machine. It can be a little difficult because what we're going to be doing is taking the holes of the button and lining them up right inside the little slot there where the needle goes. So it's easy to see from here, but when I get the foot on, it's going to be a little more difficult. You can do it, but if you have any kind of a presser foot that's got an open toe there, this is a candle wicking foot, there's open-toed embroidery, there's some embroidery foots that are clear here. Any presser foot you have that you can see a little bit better, as it's obvious there that I'm going to be able to find where those holes are in the buttons. So I'm going to try it with this one here, this open toe foot. So I'm going to snap my foot on. And I want, first of all, I want you to know that buttons, whether they come large or small, the holes on buttons are all the same distance apart. And it's hard to believe that until you actually put two together. So there's a big button, there's a little button, but if I line them up, the holes actually align. So holes in buttons are pretty much a standard distance, about 3.5 millimeter apart. So it doesn't matter whether you're sewing a large button or a small button, this is going to work just fine. Now if you don't have a machine with a particular button sew-on program, so I'm going to show you first without, you might want to take a dab of glue from a glue stick, put it on the back of your button, and just secure that on for just a few seconds. That helps you to be able to move your button around a little bit until you get it where you want it. So what I'm going for is I want to set my machine to a zigzag stitch. So find your zigzag, and then you want to adjust your width of your zigzag to about 3.5 millimeters. That's the standard distance with most buttons. So once I get that done, I'm going to try to center those two, and I'm going to start with the front two. This button has 4 holes. Some buttons have 2 holes, some buttons have 4 holes. If it has 4 holes, go ahead and start at the front 2 holes and try to get your button centered right under the needle. So as I'm going to use my hand wheel here. I'm not going to push the power on yet. Use your hand in your hand wheel, and I'm just going to slide down there and see if my needle is going through the hole. And now I'm going to come over to the other side of the zigzag and put it down this side, and I see that it's just hitting my button a little bit. I may need to adjust my button over just a tiny bit to make sure that the needle goes through the hole. I'm going to try it again on the other side, and I'm happy. It looks like it's going through both holes very well. So now all I have to do is just sew real slowly. I would go back and forth about 5 times, and you're done. Now if you have a scissors button on your machine like this one does, or the ability to sew a bar tack. You can sew a tack down, but if it doesn't, that's okay. You can just take your threads out and physically tie a knot in your threads. You can pull the threads to the back and tie a knot in them. So after I've done those 2 holes, I'm going to pull it up and do the back 2 holes the same way. Now before I do the back 2 holes, I want to let you know that sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a shank, a slight bit of play in that thread. And so to do a little shank, you can put a pin down right there. If you can kind of hold the pin down, and now I'm going to test, and there it's going through my back button hole, and now it's going through the other one. So I'm happy. I'm going to sew, and you see it sewing right over that little pin. So let me just bring the needle back up here. Now I have a little bit of play in there so that when I go to actually button this, there's enough room for my jacket or whatever, my sweater, to go under there. And as I was telling you before, if you want, you can just come back here, pull up this bobbin thread and find your top thread and pull it all the way through, and you can sew, you can tie a knot, and that'll secure that on. Now let me show you what to do if you have a machine that's a little bit more sophisticated. If your machine comes with a button sew on feature, that makes life even easier. So this Brilliant does. I'm going to go ahead and raise the feed dogs back up. By the way, when you raise your feed dogs back up, if you don't see them pop up, that's okay. It doesn't mean your machine's broken. They won't pop up until your machine takes 1 stitch. As soon as it takes a stitch, you will see the feed dogs come back up. So don't think, oh no, my machine isn't working correctly. All right, this Brilliant has a wonderful feature. It's a button sew on function. That function is going to be somewhere in your buttonhole menu. So wherever you find buttonholes on your machine, you may have a button sew on icon. For this machine, it is stitch number 70, and so I'm going to program that in. When you program in an automatic button sew on, it will take care of the feed dog issue for you. You don't have to lower your feed dogs in most cases. It already knows to stop your feed dogs from moving things through. So don't worry about having to adjust your feed dogs unless your manual tells you otherwise. Now included in this is also a special foot, and this foot is designed to sew the button on. So with this foot, I don't need the glue stick. This foot has some little prongs. It has a spot where the button goes right in there. And so here my button is going to stay in. The only thing I do have to do is make sure that the holes line up. So there's my holes. They've got 2 little red dots to let me know where my buttonholes should be, and it's going to stay in all by itself. So now I'm going to attach it here to my machine. Make sure I got it on there good enough. Sometimes I have to snap it up in there by hand. There we go. This time all I need to do is have a mark, of course, on my machine where I want my button to go, but you can see that my buttons is snugly in there. Now it does look like it moved just a hair. I still want to be sure that I've got it set up right, and it did automatically set it to 3.5 millimeters once I set the program, but I still want to check because I might not have put the button in there correctly. And so now it's going through that hole well, it's going through that hole well, so I know it's set up. Now this time, since it's pre-programmed, I can go ahead and unplug my foot pedal and press my start-stop button and let it just do its little routine. It already knows what to do. It even sewed the tack down stitch. And this button sew on foot actually has a little shank already built in there. So I didn't even have to worry about doing that. So now I can just lift my presser foot up, move it back to the next two buttonholes, and actually I should have done the front first, but you move it to the next buttonholes, and when you get to the next one, same thing. You're going to position it, check your two holes to make sure you've got it going through the right holes there, and then if you are happy with it, you just sew, put your start stop, and it will sew by itself. Since the automatic program sews a tack down, you don't even have to worry about pulling the threads through afterwards. All you need to do is clip your threads, and then as a final touch, I like to take a little dab of Fray Check or Fray Block and dab a drop of Fray glue there and a drop on the back, and that way I know those little loose ends are never going to come out again. So I hope that gave you some inspiration to get all those buttons sewn on. They're going to be on there stronger, they're going to look more professional, and you're going to be done in 1/10 of the time it would have taken you to do all of that by hand. I hope you enjoyed this tip. Let us know how you're doing, and let me know how you figured out how to do this on your machine. So that way we'll know how to teach it better next time. And if you have a machine and you think you can't really figure out how to do it on yours, call us and I'll let you know how to set your own machine up to do this. Thank you.